What up, family?
I'm Darrell.
And I'm Jeff. And we are D&J Empowerment Group. And welcome back to episode 6 of the Victory Series. Now, like you hear us say at the beginning of every single video, we create and put this content out for people who are going through struggles and feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. We're gonna let you know that you're not alone.
Nope. So this is episode number 6. One of our good friends, Brian Warwick. Brian went from having everything he could ever want to need in his young childhood life to messing it all up, but then finding redemption, finding forgiveness, and now he's leaning into what God has for his life. Episode number 6.
Let's go.
Hey, my name is Brian. This is my victory story. Man, well, I'm 40 years old. Was born and raised, I tell everybody Dallas, but actually was born and raised in Cedar Hill. I'm a preacher's kid, a Baptist minister, and don't hold that against me. And so was raised in Cedar Hill. When I was younger, we moved out to DeSoto. So I guess it was about the age, it was my freshman year, we moved out to Waxahachie, and I started going to school there. Was a football player, all-state, really enjoyed football. Man, came from a really, actually a really good background. You know, my father being a Baptist minister, we were very conservative. It was very, very, very old school. But really, man, I had some loving parents, and it was a very, now looking back, it wasn't so great at the time, but now looking back, I can see just really how good it was. My junior year of high school, I was kicked out of high school, and my father being a little bit old school let me know that, you know, I could either go get a job or go back to school. Of course, I chose to get a job, got my first apartment, and within about a year, I was locked up in maximum security prison because of a drug addiction. I'd gotten hooked on ice and meth was really my thing, and was locked up for aggravated robbery, deadly weapon, aggravated assault, deadly weapon, and theft over 20 under 100. And so, you know, it was interesting because my party career was kind of short-lived, and I came from this really good background that a lot of people would be really envious of. And the next thing you know, as soon as I got on the drugs, I was just a different person. My heavier drug use happened after an injury in football where I'd really tore up my ankle. It was actually in a playoff game, and football was kind of my life. And when I got injured and wasn't able to play anymore, well, that year, and then getting kicked out the next year, you know, what I did was kind of gone. And I just wanted to be accepted. You know, the thing with drug use is one thing, it makes you not think about whatever's going on. And another thing is you're usually with somebody, so I belonged somewhere. So we're now from the athlete to the partiers. Ended up going away. I was 18, turned 18 there, you know, at Loose Sterrett. Ended up going away to a prison in La Mesa, Texas, and it was a Smith unit. And you know, the funny thing was, I grew up so well and so nice. I just didn't understand that these consequences were real. So it wasn't until I got on the bird to take this bus trip down to the penitentiary that I realized, man, it don't matter if I'm sorry. It don't matter that I won't do it again. You know, they got something for me, and they sent me away. Altogether, I ended up doing about 9 years. You know, an interesting thing in the penitentiary that still really helped shape my life today is I remember I was laying in my cell, and I had gone to this, it was an AA meeting, and we'd go to these AA meetings because it was in the education building, it's air conditioned, so you'd be able to get out of the cell block and enjoy some air conditioning. So I went in there and they had a book in there, it was SOS, and it Save Ourselves. And it was basically like recovery, but not with God. So I got that book and I took it back to my cell block that night, and I was reading it, and it hit me, man. I was like, man, my dad's just a human being. He was wrong. All this God stuff, man, ain't none of this real. Look at where I'm at. My perception of God growing up was, how do all these other people get it and I don't? You know, I'd hear the altar calls and things like that when I was growing up, and man, I probably got saved 28 times when I was growing up, because, you know, you hear, you know, if you're still living in this behavior, still doing this, you know, maybe it's basically like maybe God's salvation didn't take for you. Maybe you need to try it again. Maybe it wasn't real. And so I just never understood why I didn't get it. What makes, so it was always, there's something wrong with me, obviously. You know, I don't get how everybody else can be spiritual and godly. So I had a lot of experiences with God growing up, but I never had a relationship. It was always, man, I just don't want to go to hell. So the next day I'm going back in, and I'm going to turn this book in, and there's a Hispanic cat in there, and he's, you know, he's totally built up, tatted up. He's somebody that usually wouldn't have any communication with me. You know, in the penitentiary, we wouldn't have talked at all. And this man stopped, and he was sitting across the room from me, and he stopped, and he looked at me, and he said, man, for some reason, I'm just supposed to tell you that God's real and that he loves you. And that happened was just, not only that it pertained so much to what I was going through right then, but that it came from an individual that we would have no communication at all, was just like God saying, man, I'm real, and I love you. And so I started experimenting a little, you know, going to church in the penitentiary, things like that. And then, you know, I won't get into all the different things that had happened while I was in prison, the injuries, the, you know, race riots, the everything else that goes on. But there was a chaplain there on my unit that said, you know, if I was looking to change, I could go to school, I could, you know, get some stuff figured out. And if I did that, there's also a better chance of me getting out earlier. So of course I was down for that. Started doing some programs, got my GED while I was in the penitentiary, even did a little bit of college when I was in the penitentiary. And anyway, ended up getting into a program that was like a kind of drug recovery, kind of, I forget what they called it. I think they called it cognitive skills. And it was basically like, hey, if somebody looks at you wrong, it don't mean they want to fight you. And it's just trying to get you ready. Because what I didn't realize till actually way later on after I've been released is growing up and becoming a man in the penitentiary really changes the way you look at things. And it changes, you don't really realize how backwards you are. You know, you don't realize, you know, to you it's normal. To everybody else, they're like, what's wrong with this dude? So I did this cognitive program. My family was good enough to take me home. Got a job where I started making some money. It was a little difficult to get a job because on paper, it looked pretty bad. So got a job with a buddy of mine, started making really decent money, and then that's when kind of the drugs and the alcohol started coming back in. And so, you know, we'd make good money, but we'd blow it every weekend. Tried to branch out into my own business, and that had failed. I basically drank it away. I met my wife shortly after I got out, and she became pregnant with our first son, Andrew, who today is about to turn 12. And so anyway, so it was a rough time, and I still look back and I kind of feel bad for Andrew because he was young and growing up in this kind of environment where, you know, dad's drinking heavily, and I was more of a speak when spoken to kind of dad. There wasn't a whole lot of love. I loved him, but I didn't know how to show it. Still getting in a lot of fights, going to a lot of bars, still acting like I'm in the penitentiary. You know, wife is getting burnt out with my behavior, no doubt, even though she was amazing and stuck with me through all this. The straw that broke the camel's back is I got in a big bar fight in Red Oak, Texas, and ended up breaking my leg, and literally the bone was coming out about 2 inches out of my leg in this bar fight. And at that point, my company was failing. I drank away people's profit. I owed people money. It was just a bad situation. So me and my 4 children, our family of 6, were living in the back of my in-laws' house, you know, sharing a bedroom. And you know, so we had no money, but I was trying to do right. In town one day, I ran into this guy, and this guy looks familiar to me, and I'm like, man, how do I know him? How do I know him? And anyway, turns out we were in prison together on the Smith unit, but it had been, you know, so many years ago, I didn't totally remember. I was talking to him, and he's like, man, you just need to come check out my church. That's what you need to do. Come check out my church. And that was a little over 6 years ago. And we went to New Hope, and we've kind of never looked back, man. We've been able to clean up off the drugs, been able to start another company that's become successful again. And man, just the amazing things that God has restored. You know, it was just last week I was looking around, and everything that I've asked him for, he's given me. And you know, one of the biggest things I'm learning right now is how to be grateful. Man, how to pause long enough to look at what you got and look at what God's done. So I know my story is different than a lot of guys because I came from a good background. I came from a good family. I came from all this stuff. But the drugs, the alcohol, and the enemy, as I like to call him, you know, he's no respecter of persons. He don't care where you come from, anything else. And now I get to look and just see what God's done, and it's been pretty amazing. Where I'm at these days with God is realizing that He loves me just the way I am, that I'm good enough, that I don't have to perform to be loved, and that my obedience from God now comes out of gratefulness for what He's done, not out of, I need to do this to go to heaven, I need to do this to be okay. So now these days I realize that my lifestyle, my obedience, my things, it's not from fear anymore. Sometimes it is. Sometimes you revert back to those old thoughts, but it's not necessarily from fear anymore. Now it's man, I just appreciate you. I just appreciate you. What can I do? You know, or what can I do for somebody else? You know, there ain't nothing better than being able to help somebody.
So guys, we truly hope that you were inspired by Brian's story. So we told you before, we do this for one reason and one reason only, and that's to empower you and inspire you to keep going. And what we can learn from Brian's story is that we could have it all. We can have 2 parents in the home. We can have everything we ever needed or wanted in life. But we can make bad decisions and bad choices, and what that does to us is that puts us in bad situations. And when we get in those bad situations, we think that there's no forgiveness. We think that there's no redemption, but I'm here to tell you that there is redemption in that. There is forgiveness in that. God loves you right where you are. He forgives you and He redeems you. So listen to me very closely. Like, don't be hard on yourself. Sometimes we do that. We do that to ourselves because we've made a mistake and we feel like we can't come back from those mistakes, but you can come back from those mistakes. They're just mistakes. We learn from them. We live and we learn. Because I told you before, God didn't call us to be a victim. Get out of that mindset. We told you that before. He called you to be a victor. Stand on your 2 feet. Keep putting one foot in front of the other one. I promise you, you're going to get to the end of that tunnel. Straight up.
Thanks for watching the video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And like we tell you guys all the time, please make sure to share this out to as many people as possible. We're trying to reach people all across the globe. And those of you that are going through struggles, we want to let you know that we're here with you and we're walking it out with you. If you want to see more content from us, please make sure to go to our website at www.djempowerment.com. And if you missed the last Victory Series, make sure to check out our Victory Series playlist. And as always, guys, we'll catch you in the next one. Straight up.